And welcome to the Binge Eating Disorder Workshop Series. Everybody is a beach body. My name is McKenna Gans. I'm the program administrator here at the Eating Disorder Foundation, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone here tonight. Today's workshop is brought to you in collaboration between us, the Eating Disorder Foundation, and Eating Recovery Center, Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center. So a little bit about us. The Eating Disorder Foundation was founded in 2003 with a mission to be an effective resource in the prevention and elimination of eating disorders through free and accessible education, support, and advocacy. We are a Denver-based organization that's now serving individuals and families nationally and internationally. I'm going to give space for Emma, the alumni family liaison at ERC, to give us a little introduction to ERC, our co-host for this workshop. Emma, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma, and I am the Alumni and Family Liaison for Eating Recovery Center and Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center. So to give a little background, Eating Recovery Center and Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center's mission is to take the very best care of patients, families, providers, and our teammates as we deliver the highest quality treatment for patients with eating disorders and mood disorders. Headquartered here in Denver, Colorado, where I'm located as well, Eating Recovery Center and Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center offers a full spectrum of treatment services for adults, adolescents, children of all genders, including inpatient, residential, partial hospitalization, and outpatient programs. And thank you so much for the introduction, and I'm very excited to be here and be here with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You can all find more information about our two organizations with the links that I just provided in the chat. And if you have any questions for our presenter or for me about EDF, I invite you to use the chat feature to communicate with us directly throughout the workshop. The chat is kept confidential and will come to me directly. And then we'll save some time for Q&A after the presentation, and I'll deliver those questions to Meredith. Hopefully we will have time to get to all the questions, but if we don't, we may include some information in the follow-up email. We likely will not be sharing the PowerPoint, but we will record this workshop and send it out as soon as possible. And now I am going to introduce our presenter, Meredith Nesbitt. Meredith is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified eating disorder specialist supervisor. She's currently the supervisor of the clinical response team with ERC and Pathlight Mood and Anxiety Center, where she engages with patients, families, and providers seeking admission nationwide. And in addition to her work with ERC Pathlight and her private practice with Three Birds Counseling, Meredith provides education and training on weight stigma and health at every size informed care around the country. Meredith earned her bachelor's degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and her master's degree from East Carolina University. Meredith resides in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she spends her free time listening to true crime podcasts, practicing hot yoga, and snuggling with her dog, Mac. Meredith, thank you so much for presenting tonight.
Thank you, McKenna. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited for us all to be gathered here and to talk a little bit about my belief and our belief that everybody is a beach body. Just a little bit of background. I manage a team of 30 staff at ERC Pathlight who are taking those frontline calls for people seeking treatment. So folks who are in crisis, needing a little bit of extra support. If you've ever called in for treatment, you've probably spoken to someone that I work closely with. I really enjoy working in admissions with ERC. It's a little bit of a different clinical perspective, but I get to fill my clinical cup with private practice work. And that's where I really dig into my advocacy work around weight stigma, clinical consultation, speaking like this, and just other aspects of clinical work that aren't necessarily in my scope of practice at ERC. So I always love getting to join forces with EDF and talk a little bit about my passion projects and my experiences doing clinical work. Before we get started digging into the Everybody is a Beachbody content, I always like to give just a little overview of Health at Every Size, or HACE. Excuse me. Most of you are probably familiar with HACE. If you're on this workshop, you've at least heard of it, if not done a deep dive. But I just like to go over them to kind of set the tone for what we're striving for and kind of the perspective that this workshop and the clinical perspective that it comes from. So Health at Every Size is an advocacy movement that is made up of 5 main principles of weight inclusivity, health enhancement, respectful care, eating for well-being, and life-enhancing movement. So weight inclusivity just means that we accept and respect the inherent diversity of body shapes and sizes that have been around for millennia, and we reject the idealizing or pathologizing of specific weights. Health enhancement means that we as providers and you as patients are supporting health policies that improve and equalize access to information and to services, and that we all are taking personal practices that improve human well-being. So we're walking the walk and talking the talk. And that means paying attention to individual physical, economic, social, spiritual, emotional, and then other needs. So it's really a holistic model. And from the provider side, we want to make sure that, the care that we're providing is taking into account every piece of someone's identity. On that note, respectful care is the commitment that we acknowledge our biases. We work to end weight discrimination, weight stigma, and weight bias, among other types of bias. We're providing information and services from an understanding that socioeconomic status, race, gender, sexual orientation, age, and other types of identities that we have impact weight stigma and are also impacted by weight stigma. And we're supporting environments that address these inequities on multiple levels. The last 2 of these kind of foundational principles of health at every size, the eating for well-being and life-enhancing movement, are difficult for a lot of people, especially if you've struggled with an eating disorder or with disordered eating. And so we always talk about this with care for those folks who have had that experience. And really the goal of eating for well-being under Health at Every Size is to promote flexible and individualized eating that's based on things like hunger, satiety, nutritional needs, but also pleasure, and really turning inwards for those cues rather than looking outward or using any kind of externally regulated eating plan, especially one that's focused on weight control. So it's really about listening to your body, tuning in. Again, things that are often hard if you have a history of an eating disorder or disordered eating. And so we often say that gentle nutrition, as it's called, or intuitive eating sometimes, is usually best implemented after an extended period of stable recovery. So after you've worked through, regaining your hunger and fullness cues, or after you've worked towards turning inwards and listening to your body, that's really when those things can start to be implemented. And we would suggest that you always, if you have a treatment team, that you always check in with them and keep that line of communication open, just in case things do come up that are difficult as you're moving towards that principle. The final principle is life-enhancing movement. Life-enhancing movement means that we support physical activities from an inclusive perspective. So we want to allow people of all sizes, shapes, abilities, interests to engage in joyful movement, enjoyable movement, to the degree that they choose. So movement is not an obligation. Health is not an obligation. And I think sometimes we're so constricted by the idea of what we feel like we should be doing. I should be moving my body for this amount of time, and I have to be this out of breath or this sweaty or dressed in these types of clothes, or, we have such strict qualifications for what movement has to be. And we really lose that joy that we have naturally as children. Just like as children, most of us are born knowing when we're hungry or full, and knowing what to do to get those needs met. Same thing with life enhancing movement. When we're kids, we're running around, we're jumping, we're, exploring our bodies and taking up space with them. And at some point, as we transition into adolescence and into adulthood, we lose that joyful curiosity and that exploration of what movement means for our body, what movement is for our body, what feels good, what doesn't, what we like and find fun and what we don't. And so that's really bringing us home to this kind of holistic view of health and understanding how all these principles work together. So summer, which is what we're talking about, is my favorite time of year. Lots of time spent outside. It stays light longer, more daylight hours to enjoy with family and friends. And of course, because I live in North Carolina, as much time as possible spent by the water, because where I live, it gets hot. We're looking at 100-degree temperature this weekend. So, for me, summer has always been a very joyful thing, but for a lot of people, summer brings anxiety or self-consciousness. And for people with eating disorders or disordered eating, it can really ramp up eating disorder thoughts and behaviors, because as the heat increases or as we're doing summer activities, we're paying more attention to our bodies, either the way that they're moving, the way that they look or feel in clothes, feeling like we need to attain a certain type of body. And it can really just increase the distress for us. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why that is and what we can do to help. So eating disorders in the summer season. In order to keep our bodies cool during the summer, we're often wearing shorts, like short sleeves, tank tops, dresses, all of those kinds of things that are a little bit more exposing than our summer clothes, or than our winter clothes, rather. This can bring up feelings of anxiety about the way that our body looks or even feels in those more exposed outfits. When you're trying on clothes as you enter the new season, I think we've all had that experience of like, oh, this pair of shorts from last year doesn't fit, or I'm feeling a little bit exposed in these clothes more than I remember being last year. And so we start to as we're traveling like to the beach or going to the pool, we're wearing swimsuits, and it's just a different season and a different style of clothing, and we're trying to keep cool. So for what it brings up for a lot of people is extra stress, and where that comes from often is for eating disorder patients or folks who have eating disorders. They have overvaluation of their body shape or size. And so this means that we're paying extra attention to that. And we also perceive other people as paying extra attention to that. So we become even more self-conscious, because not only are we paying more attention to our bodies than someone who's not struggling with an eating disorder, we also think other people are as well, which makes us more self-conscious. And that also increases this feeling of comparison with other people. How do they look in their clothes? How do they seem to feel in their clothes? Those types of things. I think too, the messaging about preparing your beach body or having a beach body can be especially damaging. And truly, the diet industry really thrives on this. I don't know about you, but I always notice a ramp up of ads, especially in the new year and then in summertime, where companies that offer diet or wellness plans really start to ramp up their advertising and try to bring people in and capitalize on that struggle or that insecurity for people. And I think too, it always begs the question for me, like, what is a beach body? What are we talking about? What does that even mean? And so for most people, I think the idea of a beach body is very specific, but it varies person to person. So it's a certain shape, a certain size, a certain weight that people feel like they have to manipulate their bodies into. And people of all shapes and sizes experience that pressure to manipulate or change their body. But people in larger bodies especially experience a more institutionalized version of oppression called weight stigma. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So there are two types of weight stigma. We have externalized weight stigma and internalized weight stigma. So externalized weight stigma is societal bias towards people in larger bodies. And this happens in a lot of different areas of life. We have a lot of different research about how and where that shows up. But for me, the big three to always talk about are healthcare, employment, and education. So in healthcare, we have studies, sadly, that show us that many physicians associate larger bodies with poor hygiene, non-compliance, hostility, dishonesty, a lack of self-control. Sadly, they spend less time with larger body patients in the room, and they're less inclined to order diagnostic tests when indicated. So we know that someone being in a larger body, as soon as you step into a medical office, you are at higher risk for being stigmatized and for experiencing poor patient care based solely on the size of your body and nothing else. With employment, we know that people in larger bodies are more likely to have difficulty finding and keeping jobs. They experience lower wages for the same jobs or performance, and they have lower promotion prospects than their counterparts. So as we're trying to, move vertically throughout the workforce, as we're trying to pay our bills and save for retirement and take care of our families, we're having a harder time getting and keeping jobs, getting paid fairly for those jobs, and then promoting vertically within them. In education, and this is always the one that really frustrates me and saddens me, children in larger bodies often experience what we call peer rejection in the school environment. And so what we see is there's this drastic drop in levels of self-esteem shortly after children begin school. So if we have them rate their self-esteem before they go into a general school environment, self-esteem is pretty high. For most children, they feel pretty good about themselves at that young of an age. And then if we have them rate their self-esteem after being in school for a little bit, we see that start to plummet for a lot of folks, especially children in larger bodies. And so this study in particular shows that self-esteem is lowest among overweight children who believe that they were responsible for their weight, so that personal responsibility narrative, and B, who believe that weight was the reason that they didn't have as many friends or were excluded from games and sports. So this is an interesting kind of segue into internalized weight stigma, because what we see with these children is that when they are recognizing that identity of being in a larger body, they almost immediately begin to make meaning about what that means to be in a larger body. So for these children in this study, they identify themselves as being in a larger body, and then they take that on and say, I'm responsible for being in a larger body, and also being in a larger body is the reason that I don't have many friends and why I'm excluded from games and sports. And so that meaning that we make from that experience of being stigmatized can become internalized. And so what happens is we take that on, we create meaning out of it, and we carry it with us. And so typically that internalized weight stigma is going to be dramatically impacted by lived experience of externalized weight stigma once we make meaning from those things that have happened. Unfortunately, we can talk about this in a very abstract manner, right? The stigma exists, but what we know is that this stigma actually has tangible impacts on people and their health, not just mental health, but physical health as well. And that just goes to show that mental health is physical health. The two are, two sides of the same coin. So people with internalized weight stigma have increased risk of things like hypertension, eating disorders, metabolic syndrome, depression, diabetes, cortisol reactivity, and weight gain. So weight stigma, to me, is a form of complex trauma. And this is because complex trauma is present in multiple settings. It occurs repeatedly over time and increases internalization of messages that contribute to negative self-talk and negative self-image. Over time, this causes people to feel unsafe in their bodies, and they don't want to go out in public. They don't want to interact with other people for fear of rejection, shame, or judgment. So we're having this, folks in larger bodies, we're having a pervasive re-traumatization over and over and over. We experience this trauma related to our bodies, and then we develop a trauma response, which says that we need to change or hide the body. And this really, we see that show up as attempts to modify the body through dieting or exercise, development of disordered eating patterns, again, not wanting to go in public, anxiety about eating with or in front of other people, dissociation from the body. Often folks who struggle with binge eating have some form of dissociation, and just increased guardedness and decreased connection with others, which it's really difficult to be a human being when connection has become something traumatic for you or something to fear. It's also really hard to seek help. And so something that I always talk about with other providers is that a side effect of this complex trauma of living in a larger body is we're often avoiding medical or mental health care, or we're having difficulty engaging with healthcare providers because we're afraid that those interactions are going to echo the stigma that we felt in so many other areas of our lives. And so, this weight stigma that we experience over and over and over again, it impacts our daily lives. And so we can talk about weight stigma on this very cognitive and very academic level. But then when we pare it down, it's things like weight stigma and complex trauma related to the body or the size of the body that truly manifests itself in things like feeling like I can't go to the beach with my children, or I can't wear a swimsuit, or these just core beliefs that we have about how our body is wrong. And so those beliefs are often formed very early on in our families. And so as a family therapist, I work a lot with clients about conceptualizing their family belief systems around food and around body size or shape or weight. We have to work within the family and look at the function of those belief systems. What are they upholding within the family structure? Who do they harm? Who do they benefit? Did your mother teach you that, no one would ever love you if you were in a larger body? Did they teach you that you couldn't be smart or successful or worthy if you were in a larger body? Who did that benefit in your family? Who did that keep small? Who did that give power to? These are questions that I ask, albeit a little bit more softly in family therapy sessions, just to understand, who decided that this is how your family feels? And where did you learn that? And how did you learn that? And when did you learn that? And the reason that these conversations are so important is because our beliefs about our bodies are really an extension of our beliefs about ourselves. And because these beliefs are formed within our family system, our identity development doesn't exist in a vacuum. We learn about our identity in relationship with other people. And so we can't really talk about self-esteem as an individual concept when it is developed relationally. And so when we acknowledge the connection between our beliefs about our bodies, our beliefs about ourselves, that's where movements like body positivity, body neutrality, and body acceptance really came from. So in reality, there is no such thing as a beach body unless your body is on a beach. Our bodies are our one home in this life, and learning to accept them as they are is a crucial skill for everyone, but it's especially crucial for folks who are in recovery or folks who are working towards recovery. And so these three movements or ways of experiencing our bodies are, part of this crucial skill. So when we talk about body neutrality, body acceptance, and body positivity, I get a lot of questions about the three of these. And the main question that I get is, what is the difference? Why does it matter? What's the difference? What do you mean? And so the way that I explain body neutrality to people is to say, even if I don't like my body, even if I'm not happy with it, even if I wish it were different, even if it's a source of great pain for me, caring for my body is just part of the owner's manual. If you think about owning a house or even renting a house or an apartment, it's not good or bad that you need to change your air filters or mop your floors. It just is. And so things like nourishing your body and drinking water and wearing comfortable clothes and, living your life in your body it's a place to start. There are those initial steps, kind of that owner's manual for your body that you can take towards making small kindnesses for your body, regardless of how you feel about it. So I don't have to like my body to make sure that it has energy in the form of food. I don't have to like my body to make sure that I stay hydrated. I don't have to like my body to wear clothes that feel soft and comfortable and that I can move easily in. These are just the things that I need to do for my body to exist in the world. And really the goal of body neutrality is to shift towards that caring perspective. And also to create brain space for other things. I once had someone explain this to me as, body neutrality for me is when I wake up in the morning and instead of thinking about my body, I think about literally anything else. And that's what body neutrality is for a lot of people, is it just is getting that space back in your life where you don't open your eyes and the first thing you think about is, what clothes am I going to wear today? How does my body feel today? I don't like the way my body looks today. All of that kind of noise that takes up so much space in our brains. That's really the goal of body neutrality, is to shift towards being kind to your body and caring for your body, regardless of how you feel about it, and to make brain space for other things. When we move into body acceptance, this is really more of a space to me of self-examination. So once you get to the point of neutrality where you're just like, well, this is the body that I have and we're going to take care of it, you can move into self-examination. And so if I wake up and my first thought is that I'm feeling bad about my body, I'm having a negative body image day, I can get curious about that. Most people on the planet wake up and have days that they don't feel good about their body. And the difference between someone who's really struggling with that and someone who's not struggling as much with that is what they do about it. So if I get up and I don't eat breakfast, or I, don't take a shower, or I don't care for my body in the way that it needs to be cared for, then, that's not going to help me lean into acceptance. But also I can get curious about how that feels and why I'm doing that. And how can I work around those thoughts? So if I wake up and don't feel good about my body, I can say, yeah, I don't feel great about my body today. But also, what does that tell me? Does that tell me that maybe I'm feeling more anxious or depressed today? Is that telling me that I'm going through something difficult? Like, why are these thoughts surfacing? And how can I work around them? Often, for me, at least, in my opinion, I think when we get to the body acceptance stage, that's where we're leaning more into things like opposite action, where, we might be having a thought, but we're going to find a way to work around it. And if we need to do the opposite action in order to do that, we will. Kind of that fake it till you make it mentality. Body acceptance also acknowledges the current state and centering real time rather than living in the future. So instead of thinking like, I need to change my body, or I wish that my body was the way that it was, several years ago, we're centering real time and saying, how can I benefit myself today? How can I make myself feel better today? How can I do something kind for my body today? And that often, by tuning into the current time, we can also turn into our own thoughts, preferences, beliefs, and values, especially, rather than letting external things decide for us. So if we're living in the future or living in the past, it's a lot easier to feel like, all right, I've got to get on that diet plan or that wellness plan. I've got to, buy all clothes in a different size so that I can motivate myself into changing my body. We look for these external cues of how we should eat, how we should clothe our bodies, how we should move, things like that. But when we can get into the present moment, we can tune into, what do I need today? Maybe instead of exercising, I'm just going to stretch. Maybe I need to wear really comfortable clothes today. Maybe I need to wear an outfit that I just really love and feel good in. Maybe I need to eat my favorite meal for dinner, kind of tuning into what we need. And so when we talk about body neutrality, body acceptance, and body positivity, when we get to body positivity, it's usually either one of two reactions. One reaction is, yeah, body positivity. I feel great about my body. My body's the best. And then a lot of my clients say, like, well, what if I don't feel positively about my body? And what if I don't feel like that's ever going to be possible? Like, what if that just doesn't seem like it's in the cards for me? And I always just normalize that for people, that body positivity doesn't always feel accessible. It's especially depending on where you are in your recovery journey. Body positivity might seem like it's on another planet. And that's okay. And it's normal. And I think that's really where these other movements came from, this body neutrality, body acceptance. The goals of those are really to kind of challenge yourself and say, you don't have to feel good about your body to do good things for yourself. So asking these questions, what if I don't feel positively about my body? Okay, then body acceptance or body neutrality might be the place to start. It might be the place that you stay forever. That journey is different for everyone, but I like to encourage people to think about, like, what if you nourished your body anyway? What if you wore the shorts or the dress or the top or the bathing suit anyway, and you enjoyed your life? What if you went swimming anyway? What if you woke up and you thanked your body anyway? I think that when we let go of the idea that we need to feel good about our bodies to live our lives, we gain a lot of freedom, because we spend a lot of time limiting ourselves from enjoying life, from engaging in activities, from only taking care of ourselves when we feel good about our bodies. And when we do that, we're really just falling for the claim of the diet industry. It's this age-old claim, right? That life only starts when you deserve it, and you deserve it by attaining a certain body type. And I think this messaging is so sad because we spend a lot of our lives closed off from things we want to do, people we want to create relationships with, goals that we want to achieve, because we feel like we have to be a certain shape or size or level of fitness or whatever in order to do them. And the truth is, you can do anything that you want to do. And when we let go of that idea that I have to look a certain way or achieve, a certain body type in order to do those things, we're set free and we can live within our values and we can pursue the things that we want to pursue. And so that's really what these movements or these journeys are about, is setting yourself free to be able to do the things that you enjoy, because just by being a human being, you deserve to have those things, and you don't have to attain a certain body or any of that messaging from diet culture. You don't have to do any of that in order to do what you want to do. You are deserving and worthy just the way that you are. So talking about reclaiming the body is this huge phrase, right? So what does that actually mean? So when we dig into the research about the connection between our bodies and our eating disorders and our emotions, we have a lot of research on those topics. And something that has been very, very interesting to me and that I've been digging into a little bit deeper lately is something called the embodied defense hypothesis. And this came out of some Italian research on eating disorders. And essentially what it says is that eating disorder symptoms express a defense mechanism against negative emotions, which most of us know, right? But the way that it does that is, when we're having this really negative emotion, whether it's fear, anger, sadness, whatever it is, our brains and our bodies go, we don't want to deal with this. Like, we don't want to deal with this gross emotion. So we're going to focus on our body instead. And so they call it attentional focus. So we increase attentional focus on our bodies instead of attending to our emotions, or what they call our affective requirements. And so basically, translating all of that is to say, when we have big emotions that we don't like and we don't want to interact with, we laser focus on our bodies as a way of disconnecting from those emotions. And that probably sounds pretty familiar to a lot of you. It's certainly not a new concept in the eating disorder world, but the way that they describe it is really, really interesting. And so it's almost a disconnection from yourself, not dissociation where we come back in, but truly disconnection from our bodies and externalization of our bodies. And so the way that these researchers talk about this is that we actually lose our first person experience of the body. So we are one with our bodies. This side is me, this side is my body. I'm one with my body. We lose that, where we are one self and the world is out here around us. We lose it, and our body becomes this thing that's out here in the world, and our self is down here. And so really the body becomes this external object. It becomes this project that we're working on, as a way for us to step away from our emotions, pretend that they don't exist, and get away from dealing with them by just thinking about our body. This also increases depressive symptoms. So it's a really interesting piece of research. But when we talk about reclaiming the body, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about how we abandon pieces of ourselves in order to cope. And this is a conversation that I have with almost all of my clients, which is, what's the function of your eating disorder, right? Because humans don't just do things to do things. We are very purpose-driven beings. And so typically, even if the function is no longer being served, even if it's not working for you anymore, at some point, your eating disorder served the function. And if we can step out of shame and we can step into curiosity, we can start to figure out how this developed. What purpose is it serving for me? Was it a friend when I was lonely? Was it a distraction when I needed distraction? Was it a way to feel safe? Was it a way to feel good? Was it a way to connect with other people? When we can get curious about that, we can step forward towards healing, because we can understand what need we're trying to get met with this behavior. And so in reclaiming the body, essentially, we're looking at this and going, I abandoned part of myself as a coping mechanism to step away from these negative emotions. And so what I'm going to work towards in recovery is reclaiming my body and reclaiming that sense, that first person experience of our body. And so that's what reclaiming the body is and what we're working towards. So I wanted to bring in a few tools for you all tonight. So I've got a couple of different categories, but starting with internal tools. So internal tools are what we're going to use for interrupting behaviors, for interrupting cognition. I like to call cognition the last mainstay of the eating disorder. And the reason for that is because a lot of the clients that I see in my private practice, whether or not they've gone through formal treatment, when they get to a certain point in their recovery, they may not be engaging in behaviors anymore, but that cognition, that eating disorder voice is really strong. Those neural pathways, they are stuck in there. And so we spend a lot of time rationalizing and interrupting that cognition and finding new ways to think and working on opposite action skills and just things to kind of get around those neural pathways that are hanging out. And then as well, cultivating things like resiliency and self-compassion. So these internal tools that are really helpful for this are going to be things like mindfulness, CBT skills, and then I've mentioned opposite action a few times, but opposite action is a favorite of mine. Distraction activities for urge surfing. So things like a gratitude journal, a self-compassion break, a meditation, kind of distancing ourselves from our knee-jerk reaction or our knee-jerk response to ourselves, and saying, what would you tell someone you love? If someone you love was struggling with this, would you shame them and speak negatively to them about it? Or would you, maybe offer them a hug or offer them some reassurance, different things that you can help, that you can implement that will help you not engage in behaviors or not follow that cognitive path with the eating disorder voice. Another thing that I talk a lot about with clients are things like co-regulating. So having a really safe person that you can go to and say, hey, I need a hug. I need us to hug until I'm relaxed. I need you to talk it out with me. I'm not able to regulate myself right now, and I need your help doing that. Another great thing, Kristen Neff, Neff, her work on mindful self-compassion is incredible. So she's got a great website. She's got a workbook. She's got several free meditations. I believe they're on the Headspace app, which is also free. Those are great things that you can do, like when you're really struggling and you're needing to do what we call urge surfing, where it's like, I've just got to distract myself for a little bit and kind of ride that urge until it subsides. Things like meditation, gratitude journals, those are really great for that, because what you're not doing is going, no, we can't do that, and pushing it back down. You're going, okay, I hear you, body. I hear you, brain. You want to engage in this behavior. We're going to do this and wait until that urge subsides. So those are some good internal tools. Environmental tools. These are sometimes harder because we don't always have control over our environment. So take these with a grain of salt, but I think it's really important to cultivate a supportive recovery environment, whatever that means for you. So I'm focusing on this slide on physical space. And so looking at things like having clothes in several different sizes. So no matter what your body looks or feels like that day, you have comfortable clothes. Getting clothes in like soft, natural fabrics, things that feel good on your body, that don't feel constricting, that don't feel stiff or difficult to move in, that you can, take a full diaphragmatic belly breath in, that move with you, just kindnesses to your body in that sense. Having, if it's accessible to you, comfortable furniture that is large enough for you, that cradles your body in a supportive way, whatever that means for you. Living spaces that accommodate your body. Sometimes for me, this means, going onto Yelp and looking at photos of the seating in a restaurant before I go to the restaurant, making sure that I'm going to be able to sit comfortably and enjoy a meal. Just small things like that. And I think too, like, for a lot of people, mirrors are really difficult when they look at themselves in a mirror. It's like, if you need to cover your mirror, whatever you need to do to make your environment a supportive one for your recovery. This isn't necessarily specifically environmental, but I always like to talk with folks about social media, and not just social media, but just media in general. So refining that, like, who are we following? Who are we watching? What are we watching and reading? Are we diversifying our worldview? Are we following pages that are supportive of our recovery? Are we getting involved in advocacy? Are we acknowledging our identity and connecting with other people? These are environmental tools that can help support your recovery. On the note of relationships and relational tools, I always recommend finding and creating community, and that can look so different for everyone. If you're an introvert, that might just be following recovery pages on Instagram of people who look like you, who are in diverse bodies or have had diverse experiences. If you're an extrovert, that might be joining a support group or an advocacy group like NEDA, getting involved with volunteer work if you're feeling comfortable enough in your recovery. For others, these relational tools look like advocating for yourself. So that might be setting boundaries with family, with friends, with providers, having accountability supports who can provide that compassion to you when you're really struggling to give it to yourself. that's kind of when we're talking about co-regulating, that's another function of that, someone who can show you compassion when you're not able to step into that for yourself. And setting boundaries in recovery. I'm going to do another talk later this year on holidays and going home for the holidays and all of the things that comes with. And as a family therapist and someone who specializes in eating disorders, I have heard and seen it all. And it's so important that we protect our recovery, especially in those spaces when we're interacting with folks who might not be the most knowledgeable about what it's like to have an eating disorder or to struggle with disordered eating. And so really just making sure that we're leveraging community, that we're surrounding ourselves with people who, if they don't understand, they want to understand and are willing to learn and support you in what you need to do for yourself. So I'm listing some resources here. I'll keep it up for a minute just in case you'd like to screenshot or write things down. But that is all that I have for you this evening, and we'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
Yeah, I've already gotten some really excellent questions. If you have one, please send it to me via the chat. Let's see, it looks like we do have a few folks who are kind of struggling with how to navigate food, body neutrality, acceptance, and positivity when you're also interacting with medical providers who are attributing your health issues to body size.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that I always recommend to people who are struggling with this is to consider using Reagan Chastain's card. So her blog is Dances with Fat. She has some really great medical provider cards that you can just print out and take into your healthcare provider. And they explain what the health at every size perspective is. They give really great evidence-based journal links about health at every size. They also lay out in a really great way your boundaries with your healthcare provider. I do not want to talk about my weight as, the cause for my medical problems. I want you to run the tests that I need run. I want us to explore my life and my habits before you make assumptions based on my body size. They do a really great job of this is what I will accept from a healthcare provider, and this is what I will not accept from a healthcare provider. And if you're not able or willing to provide that to me, then this is not a good fit. And if able, I need to find a new practitioner. But yeah, I think that's really hard. I think the medical community, and I work with some really great psychiatrists and some really great medical doctors who have done the work and have really dug into their own bias and what they have been taught that is biased, and are questioning the research and are working from a really great perspective. But that isn't every healthcare provider. It's not even every therapist, dietitian, eating disorder provider, sadly. And so I think, the other thing to remember is that we are allowed to be critical consumers, and healthcare is a service. We are made to feel that it's not, but you deserve affirming care. You deserve a provider who listens to you and takes your concerns seriously and doesn't write them off because of the shape or size of the body that you're in. And sometimes it's really hard to advocate for ourselves because of that power dynamic, right? There's an inherent power dynamic in those provider relationships. And so it is a challenge to really accept your body or even try to care for your body when you're feeling so much shame and so much stigma. And I just want to acknowledge how hard that is, because it's something that, doesn't necessarily get easier with time. You just learn more tools to combat that. So the shame and the stigma, being able to hold your healthcare providers to what I consider to be an ethical boundary of, you have to give me ethical care. I deserve ethical care. I deserve to be heard. I deserve to be treated like any other patient. And sometimes when we take that step for ourselves, it becomes a little bit easier when we set those boundaries with healthcare providers. And just acknowledging that people don't know what they don't know. And they don't know often that they're doing harm until we tell them and try to educate them. And we don't always have the energy to do that. And I want to acknowledge that as well. And so when I have clients or folks who are looking for consultation on how do I go through the healthcare system that isn't friendly to me because I'm in a large body? How do I get these tests? How do I get this diagnosis? I always recommend taking someone with you. If you're somebody, and that's harder in COVID times, but if you're somebody that gets very flooded, very activated when you're interacting with healthcare providers, you lose your words, you forget to ask your questions, you can't set your boundaries, take a support person with you if you can. That person can help slow down the interaction. They can ask questions. They can support you as you're advocating for yourself. I think that's sometimes a helpful thing. That was a little bit of a long tangent, but in general, I understand that it's hard. And I think the more work that we do to bring in these healthcare providers and educate them, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, thank you for that, Meredith. Another question that I got seemed to, connect with this idea of self-comparison. So, a lot of the time we see people comparing ourselves against others when they're struggling with an eating disorder. And then even in recovery, comparing our own recovery to someone else's. What if we see someone who seems to be thriving in body positivity while we're just struggling to wrap our mind around body neutrality?
Yeah, that's always a really hard thing. And I think the first thing that I always remind people is that if you have struggled with an eating disorder, you inherently have what we call this overvaluation of body shape and size. So you don't view other people the way most people view other people. And that's something to remember, is like my evaluation of this person and how I think they're thriving and they look so great and they seem to feel so wonderful and their life is wonderful. We can't fairly evaluate that. And it reminds me of like social media and the highlight reel, mostly in that we don't know the other person's story. We don't know what they've struggled with. We don't know what their successes have been. We don't know what their journey has been like, and so until we really create community with people and have an understanding of what their experiences are, and more often than not, we share commonalities with those people, we can't really fairly evaluate and make that comparison because we don't have enough information. We're making a comparison off of kind of like this flat, one-dimensional model or this curated thing that people want us to see. And that's not real life, right? We're all human. We all have things we're really great at. We all have things that we struggle with, things that we don't want to show other people, things that we're really proud to show other people. And so just remembering that we're all multidimensional, and also health and life and happiness are all multidimensional. So just because you're doing really great at one thing or you appear to be doing really great in one area doesn't mean that that person's not struggling as well. So trying to just normalize that human experience for all of us.
I've also got a couple questions just wanting to clarify some terminology. So a lot of the time we talk about body image and self-esteem. I think I've got one question relating to the difference between those two. And I've also got a question about the difference between self-esteem and self-confidence.
Yes. So I would say, so body image, and I actually was just attending a continuing education event on body image yesterday. So body image is the way that we perceive ourselves in our bodies moving through the world, the way that our bodies feel, look, act, all of those things. That's body image. Self-esteem is more, and self-confidence, which I think are often two sides of the same coin, are more identity-based. So self-esteem / self-confidence, let's use those interchangeably, and body image are often linked. They often impact each other. They often are impacted by each other. But self-esteem is more about identity. So it's more about meaning-making piece. Like when we talk about how these negative stigmatizing experiences that happen to us get internalized, we create meaning out of them and carry that forward with us. That's really where self-esteem, self-confidence come into play. So body image is really about your body, how you feel, move, act, go through the world in your body. And self-esteem is more about your identity and what you think, that could be like relationally, it could be in terms of mental health, it could be in terms of, your emotions or your emotion regulation. That's more identity based. It's a little more abstract.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've got one last question that I think will be a good closing point. And then if any of you guys have any more questions, please feel free to send them to me in the chat and I'll save them and see if there's any additional information we can share. So that last question was, while we're working on this kind of thing, is it normal to go back and forth? Some days to feel like you're at that neutrality point and then to have it all come back and go back to that negative feeling and bounce back and forth.
Yeah, I think, recovery is just like any other form of health, mental health, physical health, where some days we wake up and we feel great, other days we wake up and we really don't feel great. And I think really the goal is to know what to do on those days that you don't feel great. So for example, if I wake up, as we all do, and have a bad body image day, I do not feel comfortable in my body, I don't want to leave the house, I don't want to interact with other people, I go into my care regimen for my body, which is I make sure I take a shower and I'm clean and I'm warm and, I wash my hair. I make sure that I put on comfortable clothes. Like I might put on my coziest leggings and sweatshirt and fuzzy slippers and really just kind of, maybe put lotion on and kind of go through these steps of I don't feel good in my body, but I can still take care of it. And, I think it's a little different for everybody, but whatever your basic care steps are, maybe your basic care steps are brushing your teeth and eating breakfast, and that is fine. That is enough. But going into care mode and having a plan for if I wake up and I don't feel good about my body today, how do I manage that? And how is that different than a day that I wake up and I do feel good about my body? And, not making big decisions on days that we don't feel good, right? Same as mental health or physical health. You wouldn't go and, buy a house or get married or get a divorce on a day that you're not feeling great, right? So let's not make any choices about restricting food or, engaging in other eating disorder behaviors that might have a really negative impact on us. We need to focus on caring for our bodies, making sure that we're well. And then once we're well again, usually we feel a lot different.
Wow, those were some great points, Meredith. I think there's a lot for us to all absorb and consider. If any of you all have more questions, please feel free to send those to me in the chat real quick before we close up, or contact us at info@eatingdisorderfoundation.org. And fingers crossed we had no tech issues with the recording, and I will get that posted as soon as I can so folks can review it later. I hope you all stay safe and warm despite our strange weather this week. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we will see you at our next workshop.
Thanks so much. It was great to see everyone. Have a good night.